Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Devils Rink Report, this Friday, January 30th edition of the Devils Rink Report. I am your host, James Nichols. Oh, sorry, I think my phone is wigging out a little bit here. Let me just fix that. Thank you. Anyway, welcome back to this Friday, January 30th edition of the Devils Rink Report. I am your host, Devils reporter James Nichols, via New Jersey Hockey Now. And we have a stacked show today. A lot of things to talk about, from trades that happened to last night's performance to meeting the new guy, longtime Islander reporter, New York / New Jersey reporter Arthur Staple will stop by momentarily to give us some insight on the new guy and some breakdowns of what he saw from the trade and whatnot. So we got a lot to get to, but it's an exciting day for us here at the Devils Rink Report because we have become partnered partially with YouTube. We still have to hit 1,000 subscribers to go fully monetized, but we're partially monetized here. So Sean is actually going to put a goal in our chat today. He's going to add the potential of 5 super chats. We could do that now, right? So whether that's you want to just support the show, or you want to get your question to the front of the line, that is certainly going to happen, right? If you send in a super chat, you will get your question up to the front, as opposed to having to wait for everybody else. If you're at the bottom, you want your question read, super chat it up. And if you want to address it to Arthur as opposed to myself or any guest moving forward, just at the front, at them, at Arthur or whoever said guest will be, and your question will go to the beginning of the line. So again, very cool feature here that we have now. Super chats are a thing. If you want to get your super chats in, go for it. You want to regular chat it up too, we welcome those as well. So standing by now is my friend Arthur Staple of the Tri-State Hockey Podcast and Hockey Night New York. He joins me now, and we got a lot to talk about with my man Arthur here. First of all, how are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. How we doing?
I'm doing good. So, lot happened in this past week. I know with the Tri-State hockey coverage you got going on. But most notably was the trade between the Islanders and the Devils, and another one right before that with the Rangers. I don't think we've seen that in a long time, if ever, between those 3 teams in that short span of time. But focusing here on the Devils and Islanders, let's start with Maxim Tsyplakov. You know him more than any of us do in this realm. What should Devils expect from Maxim Tsyplakov?
If this was closer to last year, I would have a better handle on it. It's been a bit of a surprise how his game has fallen off with the Islanders, and I think you saw last night with the Devils that he's not quite acclimated, I don't think, yet. It doesn't seem like he's shaken off the funk that he was in with the Islanders. Strange because same coach, same guy. It just, I think, got a little injured in training camp this season, and I think that set him back. And obviously the depth, I think, up front for the Islanders is a bit better this year than it was last year. So he just wasn't able to kind of catch up to the speed that Patrick Roy wanted the Islanders, especially their forwards, to play. And I think, limiting him to 4th line minutes when he did play definitely was not his style. And I saw he started on the 2nd line last night for Jersey, only ended up with 8+ minutes. I'm sure that will change. And I think in getting him, Jersey scouts, Tom Fitzgerald, has to know that him being a 4th liner and being a guy who plays, 10 to 12 shifts a night is not going to bring out the best in him. So we'll see how they can manage it going forward. Obviously, if Jack's hurt for the next couple of games, then that bumps him up even further and gives him a little bit more of an opportunity, even though he's playing on the wing. But I think when he's at his best, he is he's a really patient player. He doesn't play at a breakneck speed. He's really good at kind of possession, zone entries, that sort of thing, curling back, looking to make a play. I think when he signed with the Islanders out of the KHL, he was coming off a 30-goal season, which kind of came out of nowhere. He'd been a 5 or 6 year KHLer without scoring, I think, more than 15 goals, and he doubles that the year before he comes over. So I think people thought they were getting this prototypical power forward, a guy who was going to crash the net, really straight line player. And I think from day one last season, he showed a really deft passing touch. I think he's got a lot of creativity to his game, and I think maybe that didn't jibe with what the Islanders thought they were getting. So, like I said, not a ton of speed, but a lot of creativity and a lot of smarts. And I think the part of his game that hurts him a bit is when he's not moving his feet. Takes some lazy penalties, and that can kind of lead to less playing time and kind of the tumble down the depth chart a little bit. So that's the overall picture. But I think the Devils seem to have a handle on probably where they need to use him to get the most out of him.
And so, obviously the styles of both teams here. Is that why you think it didn't work? Was it a stylistic thing for Tsyplakov with, the transition from last year to this year? And are the Devils maybe better suited for his skill set?
It's funny. I think the Islanders play, they Patrick Roy and Lou Lamoriello had a little bit of a disconnect on how they wanted the team to play last year. Patrick Roy wanted them to play a little bit more aggressively, in all three zones, play with speed, be a team that can capitalize in transition. And Lou is Lou, and he wanted a much more staid, defensive type style, a little bit slower, a little bit more patient. And I think Tsyplakov ended up fitting that style and maybe not kind of the forward-looking Patrick Roy style, and that's kind of why he fell out of favor this year, in addition, like I said, to the injury. I think with the Devils, you look at their top six when they're healthy, it's a group that plays fast. I think their bottom six kind of plays a little bit differently, even if they'd like to play fast. You do have some guys, I think, with quick skills. I think Gritsuk, even though he's not an incredible speedster, plays that way. I think Paul Cotter can play that way. I think Connor Brown can play that way. But I think, for me, when I look at the Devils roster, where he fits best is probably in a third line role. I don't know that he's a great checking guy. You're not going to match him up against anybody else's top line and try to win shifts in the defensive zone. But I think with line mates that can hound pucks, he has shown an ability to kind of play below the dots and play in tight spaces and make pretty nifty plays. So I feel like, he third line is kind of ideally where he should be, and maybe get a little second power play time if that's available. But I'm not completely sure that he can fit, and we certainly didn't see it last night. I don't know how many more opportunities he'll get if he can fit with the big boys in that top six over there.
Yeah, it's interesting timing too, because even in the bottom six now, you have guys like Lenny Hamanaho who are playing great hockey. So you wonder where that fit is going to fall if it does, right? But I want to now go to the other side of the trade. Ondrej Palat scores in his Islander debut. He adds an assist as well. Probably the most Devil thing that could have happened that night was him having that kind of night. I thought Darsh did well overall, though. How did you view this trade? Because I got some pushback when I said Darsh did pretty good here, getting those picks and getting a player in return who's serviceable for their needs, not maybe the Devils' needs. But what did you think for the trade on both sides here?
When I first saw it, I thought it was probably a bigger win for the Devils just to be able to get out from under that, the full load of that contract this year and next, and be able to give the Devils a chance to take a big swing or do something to shake things up in a bigger way. And then more I thought about it, and more I kind of listened, just listening to the Devils post game that night with the trade happening kind of in the middle of that game, listening to Nico Hischier say, kind of emotionally, how much he leaned on Ondrej Palat, kind of the role that you thought that Ondrej Palat would fill when he signed the big contract with the Devils, that he'd be a guy that could be a shoulder to lean on for a young core, a young leadership core too, a guy who's been around and has been in a lot of different situations. He's been on teams that were unsuccessful and just getting started. He's been on teams, as a rookie and went to the Stanley Cup final and was runner-up for the Calder Trophy after being almost Mr. Irrelevant in his draft year. I think all the things that made it an appealing signing for the Devils made it an appealing trade right now for the Islanders. And I think also hearing what Palat himself said, and he's always been a guy who speaks very plainly and honestly about himself and the team. I don't think he's ever kind of been a guy that's been above it or been, any of the messes that have happened during his time in Jersey. I don't think he's separated himself from it. But to hear him say pretty humbly, like, I was bad in Jersey. I didn't have a good season, and this is a chance for me to turn that around. And obviously doing it with a guy, Matthew Darche, who was with him during the Cup years in Tampa and knows what kind of guy he is. And, and I think you just do a cursory look. It's easy to forget. Like I said, I believe he was the 208th pick in 2011. And here's a guy who's sitting top 100, even top 75 in playoff goals in NHL history. So this is a guy that understands about how you have to put the work in. And I think whatever you want to call it, the fragility, the disaster that's been the Devils season since the 8-1 start, a guy like him playing at the level that he plays at his age is not going to be able to turn that around. And I think with the Islanders, a team that has been a surprise this year, does have plenty of over 30 guys, but also wasn't expected to do much, has been kind of given this incredible energizer boost from an 18-year-old kid, Matthew Schaefer, who's doing things we've never seen before on the island. And so Palat comes in there not just for himself to redeem, but also as a little bit of a reward to what the Islanders season has been. So you get that, you go from a season that's been this good and the confidence boost of Matthew Darche going out and getting a guy like him, that extra 10%. Maybe you get Ondrej Palat to get back on track to be a guy who fits in. Maybe you get the rest of your guys to buy in even more because they've been rewarded for what they've done. So you go from here to here, and all of a sudden, is that 4 extra points in the standings, 6 extra points? That's the difference between home ice and not in the first round. So I think it's worth it for the Islanders to do it. I understand next year is next year, and $6 million is nothing to sneeze at on the cap. But obviously with the cap going up and some money coming off the books for the Islanders, I think Ondrej Palat understands now where he is in his career, that if he's a fourth line guy, if he's the 13th forward, if he's a fill-in second line guy, I think he'll do whatever. And I know that got lost a little bit with all the other stuff that was going on in Jersey, and he became kind of the poster boy for, we got to get either him or Dougie off of the books here so we can do something else. And as I think happens a lot, that sentiment, which is perfectly normal when you're looking at the business of hockey and the business of what the Devils need to do, turns into, this guy is useless for us. And I think the comments after that game show that was definitely not the case.
And it makes me wonder. Obviously, Darche has the history with Palat, and this is me just spitballing here. I know the Devils have discussed internally Steven Stamkos, but perhaps is that something that Darche is thinking of? It kills 2 birds with 1 stone, right? I wanted Palat; he's serviceable, but can I get Steven Stamkos here too?
We talked a lot on my shows about, fans obviously want to see more. I think even Darche came out the day of the trades, the day the Palat trade was finished, or the next day, and said, we've got 2 first-round picks. I'm willing to trade them. I worked with Julian Breezeball. We're obviously not afraid to trade first-round picks. So you think about what you could get for that Colorado first, a late 20s, 30s pick, and maybe a prospect like Cole Yzerman, who, is a first-round pick, but was not Matthew Darche's first-round pick. So maybe he's a guy that he's willing to package for some more proven scoring. I would imagine they'd like to go a little bit younger than Steven Stamkos, especially with the 2 years left on his deal. But boy, the way he's playing this year, he is turning back the clock these last couple of months. And I don't know if you want to recreate the 2015 Tampa Bay Lightning a decade later. But it is interesting to think about if that connection, if Darche is looking to upgrade. The last place, they got Carson Soucy fill in a third pair spot, which is exactly what they needed. Palat maybe was not necessarily a need, but you brought him in and you can fit him in somewhere, and get rid of Tsyplakov, who wasn't really contributing. And now I think what's left for them is to get a scoring winger. So, I think if Steven Stamkos was a few years younger, maybe you'd be a little more aggressive. And who knows in this next week if Darche can pull something off with a younger scoring winger. But, I guess if you see the Palat trade, you say, boy, I don't know if I can rule it out, which would be something.
It would be interesting to see some key pieces on the Tampa Bay Lightning team that eliminated the Islanders not too long ago. So would be certainly interesting for sure. So now listen, the Devils free up the money though, right? They get rid of Palat's contract. It's like 3 1/4 or 3 3/4 and changed for the Devils that have been freed up, and now there's something like near $7 million with the salary cap in their favor. where do they go from here? Like, is that something that like they should utilize for this year, or is it something that are we talking? Let's plan for next year. Like, how do they utilize this cap space? What should they do here?
I think the fact that there's more on the table here, and the pressure that Tom Fitzgerald is under to turn this thing around, even if it's not this season, because we're getting into territory now, especially with these next 3 games and the last one before the break being against the Islanders. If they only get 1 or 2 or even 3 points out of this, with all the teams you got to climb over, and the gap between the cut line is getting pretty wide now. We always talk about if what's the kind of the traditional thing to look at is 4 points or more out at Thanksgiving. Well, we are way past Thanksgiving now,
Yeah.
and we're getting into 6-8 points. So it's desperation time for the Devils. So I'm interested to see what Tom Fitzgerald can do with this space, whether he wants to create more space. Dougie has obviously been playing lights out since the scratch, and the rumor mill seems to have calmed a bit. To me, I'm not quite sure I understand that. I think you still need to transform this team, and the way to do that is to move one of the biggest contracts that you can move, and that's Dougie. So, obviously the injury to Luke Hughes, who knows how long that's going to go. But I still kind of feel like if you're going to take a big swing, you do it now, ahead of the deadline. You try your hardest to do that, undergo that transformation that you felt like you needed to stop this 2+ month slide, whether it saves this season or not, whether it even saves Fitzgerald's job or not. I think that's still the mandate. He wanted to make a big splash. It didn't happen with Quinn Hughes. It didn't happen with all the other rumored guys. I guess you could still, if you're not going to blow it out of the water, you could still say Ryan O'Reilly is a guy that they can fit now under the cap, and also would be a pretty big change for this forward group, especially now. And I know, they're saying Jack's injury is not serious, but you still need centers. You still need guys that are winners. You've just taken one guy in Palat off your books. Maybe O'Reilly is too similar to bring him straight in, but I still feel like he's a guy who can contribute, can kind of bring the room together. This is a group that just seems like it needs a big bucket of cold water thrown on it at the moment in some possible way. And like I said, I don't know if it can save this season, but it could save some jobs, and it could save some people's reputations going into 26-27 at the very least.
Yeah, certainly. I think, the Palat trade starts that transition. I think that was one of the things that if Fitzgerald's job is going to be safe, that's where it started. But I'm looking at, obviously the standings right now, and, you see the Devils toward the bottom of that. They won last night, but so did the Islanders, so did the Bruins. They essentially gained no ground. That first round pick that they have available, this year, is that something they should be dangling, or do they hold on to that? Because at this point, it's kind of a high pick, right?
Yeah. I don't know that you can do that without lottery protecting it at this point, because I don't see them sliding into the bottom 5 or anything like that. But
right.
But I think if you're going to be in the ping pong ball battle right now, it's probably, I don't look at any of the models that do this playoff percentage thing, because it changes so much. But if I had to guess, they're probably under 30% right now to make the playoffs. And I think a lot of teams in the East have kind of slipped off in a big way in this last week, because it seems like the Islanders and Pittsburgh never lose right now. And even if you have you can't have that win one, lose one pattern that the Devils have been in for a while, or more like lose one, OT loss and that kind of thing, where you're really dropping down the standings. So, it's just hard to stare at the standings right now and say the Devils can still do this. I think these 3 games coming up are obviously the biggest 3 of the season. You've got a couple of teams that are kind of fighting it out down there with them below the cut line in these next 2, and then a 4-point game with the Islanders. And if they win all 3, then yeah, I think there's more optimism going into the break, and maybe that changes what Tom Fitzgerald does coming out of the Olympic break. But I think if there's even a loss just in the next one, tomorrow night, I believe it's Ottawa, then I think you got to start thinking about, well, what can we recoup here? Because it's just, you can't go on wishful thinking. I understand they want to make a big splash still with the trade that they made, but it might be too little too late.
Yeah, certainly. I got one more here for you, Stape, and then I'll let you get on your way. I know you're a busy man. Just looking at the last few years, from 2022 to 23, and then after that, I mean, they had that successful run, and then each season after has kind of been a disappointment. I know they made the playoffs last year, but not in the way they wanted to make it. They didn't really make the noise they thought that they could. So it feels almost like perhaps at some point here, if this season doesn't go the way they wanted to as well, which it looks like that's how it's happening, you got to look at the core, I think, right? And I wonder if there's a shakeup there, who's the core player that has to be maybe moved out? Because you look at Jack and Luke, I don't think they're going anywhere. I don't know if the captain's going anywhere. So yeah, you're kind of narrowing it down. But to you, who's that core player that if you're going to make a big shakeup there, move a core player to get a core player, who's the guy on the Devils that you're moving?
I mean, I genuinely think once they sort out, if it goes the way that it seems to be going, they miss the playoffs, ownership makes its call, they keep Fitzgerald, they decide to move on and bring somebody else in, whether it's somebody a fresh perspective, or it's Tom Fitzgerald with a mandate. Maybe he shakes up his front office a little bit. Maybe he gets rid of Sheldon Keefe and brings somebody else in. Whatever they do from that starting point, I think everybody's on the table. I think Jack and Luke are on the table. I think your captain is on the table, although, the fact that he's kind of a short timer now contract-wise complicates things. I think Jesper Bratt is on the table. I think when you have a core that's been together long enough, and they're still young guys, but it's been a decade now of Bratt and Hischier at the very least. And it's been 6-7 years now of Jack Hughes and a few years of Luke Hughes. I think you have to not rule anything out. And, I think I even kind of wonder what the market would be for Jack at this point. I understand a freak injury is not something you can predict, and it's obviously hampered him. And now whatever this small injury is would be a blip on the radar if this was the only thing that happened. But you've got a lot of years of 50, 60, even less games played. Can you build a franchise around a guy who's not always there for a full season? And especially a team like the Devils that needs a full 82 games to be able to get in the playoffs and be able to be successful in the playoffs. So I would hope that whoever it is, whether it's Tom or someone else, that you're making calls and you're sort of gauging interest in just about anybody, because no one should be safe. I understand people point the finger at Fitzgerald. He built this team. He gave out the no move clauses to Hamilton and to Palat, and you own that, and you have to deal with it. And the coaches that they've cycled through haven't always been perfect, but at some point you got to land on the talent. And I think these guys, whether it's mental fortitude, whether it's a skill-based issue of just not being able to finish chances, a skill-based issue of not being able to understand when you have to do defensively in front of your goalies to make them better and more consistent. There's been a lot of falling short at a lot of levels. So once you sort out the front office coaching situation, the thing they got to look at is the players. And obviously, for me, none of that core should feel like they have earned the right to stay here beyond this season.
Well, Arthur, I look forward to sifting through the Jack and Luke Hughes to Minnesota rumors with you this summer. But thank you so much for joining us today, Art. We'll catch up soon, and enjoy your weekend.
You got it, James. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you. There he goes, Arthur Staple, Hockey Night New York, and the Tri-State Hockey Podcast, and a lot of interesting things there, guys. A lot to unpack with, who do you think about moving in this core if the season goes sideways, which it looks like it's going that way. And, you look at how this trade deadline coming up with, whether it's by the Olympics or by March 6th when the trade deadline ends, what's the landscape of the Devils going to look like? Because, Tom Fitzgerald's working for his job right now, and it started with the Ondrej Palat trade, and it's going to be super interesting to see how this all unfolds. They continue to be middling. They kind of saved themselves a little bit last night with an overtime win against Nashville. Take 2 points that are very necessary, and it's going to be slim down the stretch here. So, we'll see how it all unfolds, guys. It's going to be tight. But a lot of interesting perspective there from my friend Arthur Staple on Tsyplakov, the Palat trade, and we're gonna dive into some of this stuff more now. But before we get going, I just want to remind you guys that we have our new super chat feature on. So, guys, listen, for things such as, you want to send me on the road, like I want to go on the road a lot more than I'm capable of, right? The budget's not always there. Local journalism, you see where all of this is going, right? Local journalism is taking a bit of a hit these days. So, listen, now, us guys, we're on YouTube and stuff like that. So, support local journalism, help us out, and get us to those road games. We want to go to as many as possible. We get to go to mostly the locals and stuff on the East Coast. But anywhere out like West is kind of difficult. But if you want us there, we want to be there. So listen, please, we have a goal. If we can get 5 super chats on our first super chat stream, we would be most grateful. We really appreciate all the support. And regardless, even if you don't want to throw a super chat in there, that's okay too. Any regular chats are fine. We're gonna get to these questions and everything at some point. But we really appreciate the support, and are thankful for you guys to be here while we just talk Devils. And you guys have to look at my ugly mug and have to watch the sun shining in my face that I thought I covered a little bit, but I guess not. I'm gonna pull this curtain here. But anyway, let's get to some of the notes before we get to your guys' questions. Again, if you want to send those chats in, be sure to do so. If you want to send those super chats in, we really appreciate the support. Thank you so much. I wanted to start with the obvious, the trade that sends Ondrej Palat to the Islanders with 2 picks attached, a third this year and a sixth round next year, in exchange for Maxim Tsyplakov. And look, there's no other way to describe this trade other than an undeniable win for New Jersey. And that does not mean it's a loss for the Islanders. Absolutely not. I think that Darsh did pretty well for himself. Getting a guy in Palat who can fill in for, Kyle Palmieri, who went down earlier this season. He showed a lot of patience there, but getting that draft capital as well. The Devils don't need it. They have all their young guys on the roster. But the Islanders do, because they're still trying to, they're in this awkward spot where they're kind of good, but they need some young guys in their pipeline still. Whereas the Devils are in a different spot in their trajectory. So, I think Darsh did well, but I think Tom Fitzgerald, for as hard as we've been on him with what he's done, undeniably did well here too. Yeah, it's the contract that he signed Palat to, but he bit the bullet and he admitted to himself, okay, this didn't work. I got to move on from this player, right? I need Dougie Hamilton right now, and I also need cap space. And he found a way to not only move Palat, but not have to attach any assets to get rid of him, and didn't retain any money. That's an absolute, undoubtedly, it's a win with all capital letters. WIN, win. We want to fly the W flag. We'll borrow it from Chicago. It's a win. And the reason why it's a win is because it gives them the flexibility to go out and add where they need, right? Palat wasn't working in New Jersey. He might work in New York, where they play a different system. Maybe it fits him a little bit better. And look, if he starts scoring goals and you're seeing a different player at a Palat that you saw in New Jersey, of course, everything in hindsight is always 2020, right? But you have to understand, look at the difference between the New Jersey Devils and the New York Islanders. The Islanders play a different game than the Devils do. And it's interesting because you could actually argue just last year it was the reverse. They played one style where the Islanders played the other. They've kind of switched roles here. But the Islanders have a different makeup where it might work for Palat there, and that's okay. Tsyplakov comes here with a clean slate, a fresh chance, and look, he's a guy who scored 10 goals and 35 points in his rookie year last year, and he's a bit older, right? He's 27, so he's not your traditional sophomore, and he's getting up there in terms of this is his prime really. So can he get back to that 10 to 15 goal range, chipping in 40 points while being a big body at 6'3", almost 215 pounds? You take that on the third line. It will be interesting to see if he can cut through the noise, because you have guys like Lenny Haminaho, who are, by the way, amazing. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, oh, he's an elite top 6 guy. He's just a really smart all-around player. We'll get more. I'll get to more on him a little bit later. And Sonny Gritsyuk, who we've seen all year. You're just really happy with the returns there. Another very smart player, has all the tools in the world. He's younger than Tsyplakov, so he has the ceiling still to grow. And I think he will grow into a really good middle 6, borderline top line player. That shot you see, it's really good. He's among some of the top scoring rookies. So It's a really good development for the Devils to have Lenny Haminaho and Arseniy Gritsyuk. And now adding Tsyplakov to this mix is interesting, right? Now you have a little bit of internal competition. Where is this going to go? Because it's not like next year Tsyplakov is just going to go away unless they trade him, but he's got another year in his contract. So he's in the mix now, and he's kind of a little bit of what they didn't have. He's 6'3", 200 and almost 15 pounds. He's already the biggest forward the Devils have, and you kind of need that, right? So especially if they're going to get to the postseason, you need that kind of big body. So first game wasn't great. You saw him. I think he threw something like 5 hits. He had no shots. He started on the second line, but his minutes kind of dwindled. And I asked Keefe about that last night, and he said, it was a difficult game for him only because Jack got hurt so early, and then he had to just kind of go with what he knew, and he was, putting these pairings or these trios together that he was comfortable with, and that he could rely on. Whereas with Tsyplakov, it's kind of an unknown to him right now because he only played 27 games. He didn't see him all that much, and last year he only saw him 3 times. So he needs to get to know Tsyplakov a little more, let him work to his strengths. And look, he gave him he gave him the opportunity to do well on the second line right away. And we'll see how it goes, over the weekend and into next week. But look, don't be surprised if, he doesn't, jump and burst onto the scene, kind of like Palat did, because Palat is a multi-year veteran. I think he's up to upwards of 10 years, almost, I think maybe 12 in this league. Whereas Tsyplakov is a 2-year, player. This is his second year. So, Tsyplakov doesn't have that same experience that Palat has to be able to jump in, kind of like how he did with the Islanders. So give Tsyplakov some time. No excuses, right? The Devils need results, but I think that Tsyplakov could be serviceable. He just got to be utilized to his strengths the right way. So listen, trading Palat instead of Hamilton also was huge, right? Because you don't have Luke Hughes, so you need Hamilton. That was a big deal. Moves you on from an aging player. And I said, in my piece earlier this week, Fitzgerald's made some questionable moves in his tenure, including signing Palat to that contract in the first place, like I said, but admitting that he had to move on from it, and he wanted to sign Johnny Gaudreau that offseason, and he didn't get him. His pivot was Ondrej Palat. So without retaining salary, it's a genuine win. You really like that from Fitzgerald. It's a good trade, and now you got to see what he does with the cap space. So Dougie Hamilton, it looks like the Devils are going to keep him. You heard from Arthur, you think that he thinks that if you're going to really change the landscape here, you got to free up even more cap space, and he's probably right. But I don't know. I don't see it happening till the summer now. I mean, Dougie Hamilton has the longest point streak of anybody in the NHL actively right now. Dougie Hamilton, the guy who 2-3 weeks ago was a healthy scratch against the 30th ranked Winnipeg Jets because of performance issues. Now we know that perhaps it was to facilitate a trade, but he gets back in the next game and he has a fire lit under him, and suddenly he's playing like the Dougie Hamilton we all know he can be. So he looks like he just maybe needed a swift kick. He's got 2 goals and upwards of, I think, 10 assists in this 9-game span. Playing really well. Now, there is the other side of the puck for Dougie Hamilton where he could, flub a pass like he did last night against the Predators and send a puck up the middle to the blue line that converts into a goal for the Predators. That was an awful clearing attempt. But, those things are going to come with Dougie Hamilton. He makes those kinds of mistakes. And you just kind of have to hope that he outpaces those mistakes with his offense because he has that capability of doing so. So again, 10 straight games, 2 goals and 10 assists in that span. And it's what's best for the team right now. You have to give him credit for finding his game again, because it's a lot to overcome. We haven't spoken to him in the media yet. They've mostly been on the road and not a lot of practice time. Today was an optional. So, it's one of those things where we haven't gotten to talk to him yet. I do plan on eventually, getting a hold of him and, asking him like, hey, where are you at right now? We just haven't had that opportunity. So give us some time and we're going to get there for sure. But let's talk about last night's game, a 3-2 overtime win, a game where, you know, I was talking to the wretched Ryan Novozinsky in the press box about this the other night. And, it's one of those things where the Devils win a few games, and you're like, oh, maybe this team can, go on a run and make it happen. And, they won like 5 of 6 recently, and then they lost 3 straight, and you're like, they're right back where, 2 steps forward, 4 steps back with this team, right? And you kind of get this false sense of hope that that they can figure this out and get themselves back in the postseason. Right now, they're 8 points out. Um, and you know the thing with the Devils is I think there is something wrong with this roster. Obviously, Fitzgerald admitted it. This is on him. Obviously, moving Palat out is one of the things that starts this retool, if you want to call it that. These terms, I don't even know what to call them anymore. Call it a shakeup, call it a retool. It's not a rebuild. I understand not wanting to use that word because they're not tearing it down to the studs yet. Um, Maybe that's coming. Who knows? We'll find out this summer what direction everybody's going to go in. But again, it's right now, and I ended the show last week with, if you ask me, the Devils are not going to make the playoffs. It's a really steep hill. They haven't really beaten anybody in their own division outside of that 8-game win streak. They have left a lot of 4-point swings on the table. It's really, really tough pill to swallow. And moving forward, like they have the Blue Jackets and the Islanders next week. Um, that's two tough matchups, two teams that are ahead of them in the standings, and they're huge games. Even this game this weekend against the Senators, like they should win that game. Now, will Jack Hughes be in the lineup? Well, let's talk about it because last night he, injured himself, or somebody else injured him. Couldn't really tell what happened. Takes a shift, about 6 minutes into the game, or maybe even less than that. I think he took a shift like 3 or 4 minutes into the game, left for the locker room and came back several minutes later, tried again for another 50-second shift at like the 7-minute mark. And you saw something was bothering him, and he had to skate back off, and he had to go to the locker room, and he was shut down for the rest of the night. And um, he originally it was said that he had an equipment issue. I did a little bit of digging, found out that nope, it's injury related. And Sheldon Keefe confirmed after the game it was a lower body injury. And he's quote unquote day to day. This morning the update was there's not really an update. He had to get further imaging, which I think is gonna be like now, relatively. He's not going to Colorado. That's that's the thing. It's not even an upper body thing, so he's not going to Colorado. It's going to be a local thing where they're going to decide, like, okay, what's the extent of this injury, and are you going to travel to Ottawa? They don't even know if he's going to play tomorrow. The good news is Cody Glass will play tomorrow. So, or well, I shouldn't say that. He will travel tomorrow. They're going to evaluate him when he wakes up and see how he feels, and hopefully you get that line back together with Arsenij Gricic and Lenny Hamanaho that was working so well. Because they're going to need that in order to, if they're going to put together this run that, you're all hoping they do, they're going to need that line to perform because, my goodness, that line has really carried them over the last little while here. But, yeah, the Jack Hughes thing is tough. 2 injuries in the same season after back-to-back devastating injuries in 2 seasons prior. I said to Ryan and Danny in the press box last night, I'm like, yeah, you have to wonder, and I've asked this question before. This is not something that I haven't said out loud already. At the end of last year, I said to Tom, like, can you confidently build around a guy like Jack Hughes where you're not getting more than 60 games out of him? And of course, he gave the vow of confidence, but maybe next by this summer, it's not Tom answering that question anymore, and the person who does step in as GM has no qualms with maybe moving on from a Jack Hughes. And look, maybe that means that you have to move on from Luke Hughes too, right? It's a package deal, perhaps. We'll see. Obviously, we're not there yet. This is all just spitballing and foresight and speculation at this point. But there is a reality where this all kind of could come to fruition, right? Pretend this is the Marvel multiverse, right? There's a timeline somewhere where, the Devils don't get Quinn Hughes, and then Jack and Luke end up in Minnesota. That's unfortunately a reality in some multiversal timeline. But another Jack Hughes injury last night, and again, it's one of those things where you're kind of hanging your head, despite a win. It was a great overtime effort by Nico Hischier. It's an important 2 points to keep the heartbeat going here, to keep them alive in New Jersey, to keep them in the playoff race. Um, but you're worried, right? And Team USA is probably a little bit worried now. Pierre LeBrun said earlier today, and by all accounts, everything that we've learned on the Devils end of things, nobody's worried about this being a long-term thing. Seems minor, doesn't seem serious, but they just need to get more clarity in more tests and everything like that. But again, now Team USA has to worry about, did we just lose Jack Hughes, right? Um, and it's so ironic because last night, not only did Jack Hughes get hurt, but you see Patrick Kane with Detroit set the all-time record for the most points as a U.S. player. And who's the direct comparable to Jack Hughes? Well, it's Patrick Kane. And everything that Patrick Kane is what Devils fans have hoped that Jack Hughes can be as a New Jersey Devil. And it just hasn't worked out that way, not because of the talent, but because of his durability. So it's a really ironic twist how he sets that record last night, most points as a U.S. player in history. And Jack Hughes is hurt for a second time in the season. The first time he's hurt is not even on the ice. It's off the ice with freak accident, and you're just so frustrated at that even happens. And then the second time he gets hurt on the ice. So it's tough. And I seen, Sidney Crosby was hurt for like 75%, or he was only healthy for 75% of the beginning of his NHL tenure. Jack Hughes could do this too. Look where Crosby is now. I get all that. I do. Truly. I truly get all that. It's just they're not the same player. It's different to me. I don't know. I mean, Sidney Crosby is a bigger guy. He is able to, you know, withstand a little more. It was a concussion thing for Sidney Crosby. With Jack, it's the shoulder, and now it's the lower body, right? It's a lot. It's a lot. So you do wonder if it is similar. I don't think it is that similar. I think it's a little bit different. But regardless, the Devils overcome the loss of Jack Hughes, pull off that 3-2 overtime win. I want to talk about Lenny Hamanaho real quick. I mean, he's undoubtedly solidified himself in the bottom six. He's working his way potentially through the lineup. Eventually maybe he'll get up there into a top six role. I'm laughing because we got a couple of super chats that we'll read in a little bit. But 2 goals and 2 assists in 6 games from Lenny Hamanaho. And one of the things that everybody that you talk to in the Devils' locker room says, the first thing they say about him, so smart, such a smart player. And I asked him last night, how comfortable are you? I know it's a short turnaround here, but he said, I'm pretty comfortable. I feel good about my game right now. And everybody seems to agree that like he just looks and feels like he belongs. And certainly I'm not questioning it. I don't think anybody in the locker room is questioning it. I think, Sheldon Keefe is kind of blown away with how good of a player Hamanaho is. Again, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, he's a bona fide top 6 stud. But he's certainly a serviceable middle 6 guy that every championship team kind of needs. So he's definitely, I don't want to say a core piece, but he's an important piece moving forward for this team. And to have him be able to grow with Arseny Gritsuk is certainly important. So that's encouraging to see. Like I said, I get Tyler Toffoli vibes out of him. Is he the newest version of Fabian Zetterlund? Producer Sean asks. With size, perhaps, right? I know that Zetterlund had that mass because he was, benching and squatting so much weight. But Hamanaho is a bit taller, perhaps not as dense, but he's certainly taller than Zetterlund. So it's actually a pretty good comparison. Like play styles, they're certainly comparable there. So we touched on Cody Glass. He's going to go there. He's going to go to Ottawa, with the team. They're going later today. And then we got into some. So I put an article out, trade tiers, yesterday. This was Devils trade tiers. Who the Devils are going to keep untouchable. Chips for premier returns, and you can go check that out on New Jersey Hockey Now via Sportsnet. Real quick though, my safe untouchable players are Jack and Luke, obviously, and Nico Hischier. I think Brett Pesce is there too because he's your best defenseman. You have him with that, full no move clause anyway. You can't really move Brett Pesce, and even if the Devils did get a true number 1 defenseman, you need a shutdown guy like him. Trade chips for premier returns, Bratt, Meier. I think it's time to consider those guys as trade chips to get something major in return. I'm not saying or suggesting Brady Tkachuk is available, but if he has, if you can call and they pick up the phone for Brady Tkachuk, those are the guys you're offering. Hamilton, Nemec, Haminaho, Gritsuk, Yegorov, and Malik, those are guys that you want to only move if it is for a premier return. You try not to move a Yegorov. You try not to move a Haminaho or a Gritsuk. But if you have to, and there's a Jason Robertson on the table, listen, you got to do what you got to do. We'll trade for an upgrade, guys. Dawson Mercer, Jonas Siegenthaler, Cody Glass, Anton Silyev. Like, you don't need any more defense prospects, so Silyev can go. To me, I think he's going to be an NHL defenseman. I think he'll be a good one at that, but you just largely don't know with him. Cody Glass, you love what you're seeing with him, but maybe you have to kind of sell high on what he's doing right now. Jonas Siegenthaler, cheap cap hit for a reliable defenseman, but he has his moments. If somebody wants him, include him. Dawson Mercer, I mean, you want this guy to be more. He just isn't, and it hasn't worked out that way. I know other teams covet him as a player. Maybe he fits more stylistically with another team, but he should certainly be on the table. Package building chips: Seamus Casey, Colton White, Paul Cotter, Maxim Tsyplakov, Nico Dawes. I think that's self-explanatory. Unlikely to move because of trade protection: Brown, Dylan, Kovacevic, Dadonov, and Jake Allen, for both trade protection purposes, but also he's signed to that 4-year deal for a reason. And then nobody wants these guys: Jacob Markstrom, Stefan Nason, Luke Glendening, and I will always say, Juho Lammikko, why are you here? I don't know. Okay, so that's it for the notes, guys. Let's talk to the chat here. And I know we started a little bit early today, but we did get a couple of super chats. And guys, I appreciate that overwhelming support. Even if it's only a few of you, it is really nice to just see that come through. Our first stream with the super chat function, and you guys are showing support, and we really appreciate that. And our first one ever comes from @Sonic9123. And Sonic, you will go down in the Devils Rink Report history. We will be sure to have you in the books with this $2 super chat. Thank you so much for the support. Much appreciated. The question from Sonic9123 is New Jersey turning into sellers, or are they still buyers? And I think it's a great question, because the fact of the matter is that, look, again, Fitzgerald is managing for his job right now. And that's the scariest part of this whole thing, is that, the fact is, unless ownership comes down with a hammer and says, you need to tank, do not sell that first round pick, we're not buying, I don't see that happening. The Devils haven't made the playoffs in back-to-back years in like 15 years. I do think ownership wants a playoff run in the building again this summer, and like, this team has the horses if they could stay healthy and put it together, and they get the right pieces at the deadline. I do think that they're still buyers. I don't know if that's a good thing, because let's say that first round pick is traded, and they don't make the playoffs, it could be a high pick. Yes, you're gonna want a top 10 or lottery protect it. You got to see if it happens, if you can make it work. But right now, undoubtedly, I don't understand why Fitzgerald, for his sake, would sell. It doesn't make sense for him, because he's trying to save his job. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the support @Sonic9123. Our first ever super chat. You will go down in history. The wretched Ryan Novozinsky just supports and says a $1.99, and then another $1.99, just to tell me this show sucks. Buddy, thank you. I appreciate you. And I know you don't mean that. Last night, just so you guys know, Ryan told me he loves me. That happened. Love you too, buddy. All right, let's get to the rest of your questions. Thank you so much for being here and showing up for just, again, general chats. Those, we welcome those too. We do still have our goal up for 5 super chats in the stream. We are up to 3. If anybody wants to get us up to our goal of 5, please and thank you. We really appreciate that. Like I said, send me on the road. Send Ryan on the road on his show. See, Ryan, I support you. I support your show, because rising tide floats all boats. But please send me on the road. help me out with the a little bit of funds to do so, because like I said, like Ryan says all the time, local journalism is going down the drain, and that's why we're doing these things. And look, it's a lot of fun. We're happy to do them too, but certainly is. So we need two more to hit our goal. We would love to do it, and if not, that's okay too. But Sean, let's get a couple of other starred questions we have here from some chatters on the show. And at Pulp Mystic says a major factor though is that Fitz is gone. Is that if Fitz is gone, they don't make the playoffs this year. There's no tenable way they can stay after that. So I wonder how that affects his approach to the deadline. So I'm not sure who they is. There's no tenable way he can stay after that. So I wonder if that affects. Okay. I think I understand this now. Yes. So I agree, right? His deadline approach is going to be that, hey, I have to save. I kind of just said this. I have to save my job, right? And he started doing that with the Palat trade, which again I think was a good one. I'm pretty sure that probably sits well with ownership because he was able to not only offset the dollars from Palat, but he was also not in a position that he had to attach anything to it that was going to be of significance. He didn't have to retain anything, right? So he still has his first round picks. He still has his, Seamus Casey's and his Anton Silyevs to work with in a deal. So a third and a sixth, like you look at the history of those draft selections, especially for the Devils, right? You have Arseny Griciuk and Jesper Bratt on the roster right now who are notable late round draft picks. But after that, I mean, it's you trade those guys, right? Or not those guys, you trade those picks. So certainly it's a no-brainer to move those selections. He's gonna be aggressive, in my opinion, unless there is like I said, a hard message from up top that says we are not buying, we are selling. I don't see the Devils not trying to make something happen either before the Olympic break or at the March 6th trade deadline. And I'm not talking like how he did when he got Jake Allen, forward thinking for next year. How am I going to fix the goaltending? I'm talking like here and now and having to get this team into the playoffs, because if it doesn't, like we said earlier in the show, you're just like if the Devils don't make the playoffs, which I don't think they are, if the Devils don't make the playoffs, you just know that this summer, yeah, there's going to be Quinn Hughes to New Jersey rumors. There's also going to be Jack and Luke Hughes rumors going the other way. It's going to be an interesting time to be a Wild fan or a Devils fan. So we'll see how that goes down. Thank you for the question, Pulp Mystic. Next question from Nancy Baldessano says, I think you're wrong. Jack and Luke need to be traded. I don't know if she means if I'm wrong or if Fitzgerald is wrong, because I don't think they will be traded. Do I think they should be traded? I mean, right now, obviously, no. I think there is still a team here to salvage. Now, it is a tough situation that they're putting the Devils in with their health or lack of it. And with Jack, it's it's not just a trend. Like this is how it is. With Luke, you kind of hope that it's better. He's obviously injured right now, but he doesn't have the same kind of history that his brother Jack does. Look, if they're trading them, which I mean, Luke is 22, so he's the kind of guy who you keep and you build around. But having his brother traded is tough, and it's one of those things where if one goes, you're just assuming the other does as well. So ultimately, look, if the Devils decide, okay, we're going to go in this direction, we didn't make the playoffs this year, and we need to just completely revamp the system, and they get an inkling that Jack and Luke are maybe unhappy with how the Quinn Hughes thing went down and everything like that, then yeah, you got to move them. I actually wrote that not too long after the Quinn Hughes deal was made to the Wild. I wrote like you got to go back and talk to Jack and Luke and say how committed are you here, and whether that's current or new regime, new management, that conversation needs to happen. And if they say 99.9% yes, that's not 100. You trade them. If they are 100% committed to New Jersey, then okay, Let's figure this out. Let's fix this, and we will move forward with this as the core. But perhaps you look at a guy like Bratt, or you look at a guy like Meier, and you say, okay, we got to move on from you. I don't think they're going to do that with Nico. I have seen some of the discourse online about that. I don't see it. Look who steps up every single time Jack goes down. You saw it literally last night. Who won the game? I don't think Nico Hischier is going anywhere unless there is a full fire sale, which I don't see happening. I mean, it's so funny. We're talking about this after a win last night. I mean, they won. I know they're 8 points out, but they won, So certainly it is interesting, but we will see. Sean, let's get another one up in here. Oh, and thank you for your question, Nancy. Really appreciate that. At MFB says Timo or Bratt, who goes? James. And I would say between the two, the first guy you should think about moving is Meier. But who is most likely to move out of those two guys? They both own no move clauses, full. So that's for the first hurdle you have to jump. Second, the most likely to move in terms of who would want or who's the easiest to move would be Bratt. One, because again, back-to-back years with Jack out, he was the Devils' leading goal scorer, point collector. He has had these moments where he's driving the bus. He hasn't done it this year, but his cap hit is more palatable. His skill set is too similar, I think, to Jack's, where they have very good chemistry, but you don't need more of the same if you're going to trade, guys away. You're trading a power forward in Meier, or you're trading a two-way elite center that you need to win a championship, Barkov like in Nico Hischier, or you're trading superstar Jack Hughes, or projected one day number one defenseman Luke Hughes. That doesn't make sense either, right? So it really comes down to Meier and Bratt, and you already have a playmaker in Jack, so you're going to get rid of Bratt. And not to say that he's the player that should go because he's not performing as well. You could probably get the most for Bratt. And again, let's say it's the Senators, and you put Jesper Bratt on the table and you say, hey, let's make a deal here. And Bratt, for some reason, is willing to go to Ottawa. You get Brady Tkachuk in return. Yeah, you're going to have to add to Bratt, but that's the idea here, is to make this major change to shake up the culture and say, this wasn't good enough. And you put everybody on notice. And look, a guy like Brady Tkachuk comes in, 30 goals, 30 assists. He's not a 100-point guy, maybe not like his brother. Maybe he could be, I don't know. But 30 goals and 30 assists, but he does literally everything else. He kills penalties, he plays power play, he's agitating, on the ice, and it's just one of those things where he's just this all around elite player. And there's a reason why he's on Team USA. There's a reason why he was the centerfold of the Four Nations faceoff with his brother. I mean, they really took over that tournament, and they can do that in the NHL too. So that's just the way I think of it. That's why I think that Bratt would be first, not because he's the lesser. I think he's actually the better. And he's more consistent than Timo Meier has been over their careers, if you take a look at it. But thank you for the question at MFB. Nancy asks, if you were the GM, who would you be targeting, and what would you be willing to trade for it? So, great question. And I had put out this morning my three-tiered 16-player Devil's Trade targets list. And if you just scroll to the bottom for to the premium players, look, if you get the slightest scent of the Dallas Stars coming to terms on a trade with the Rangers, which will then include an extension for Artemi Panarin, the first thing you're doing is you're picking up the phone and calling Jim Nillen saying, okay, now I know that you can't afford to keep Jason Robertson. What are you doing with him? And if they can get Jason Robertson, you absolutely do it, and you do not ask any questions. And who do you want for Jason Robertson that's not named Hughes or Hischier? And we will make it happen. That is what you do. You go get that guy. And if he is not available, then you have to start assessing, okay, where are our biggest needs? So one of the players that I think I've seen on some draft boards, on some trade boards, but regardless, is a player that I think the Devils should go after for this year and the next few years after this, if they're going to not blow it up and try to continue to go on these playoff runs. I'm calling Columbus, and this isn't a an elite top six guy. This is a third line center. I'm calling Columbus for Charlie Coyle, and I'm saying, hey, what is it going to take to get this guy? Because if you look at Nashville, they did say anything and everything is possible. Ryan O'Reilly might be on the table, so might Steven Stamkos. Those guys are going to cost a lot more. I think you go to Columbus and you say, what is Charlie Coyle going to cost, and what can we do to get him? He's a big body. He's a shoot first mentality. He battles for net front position. He's really good in the faceoff dot, and I think that he's the perfect guy to slot behind Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier on the depth chart as a 3C. I think he also could play power play. He could play penalty kill, and it's probably second unit power play, but he could play penalty kill, and he's like one of those guys who is an agitator, right? He's not the Brad Marchands, he's not the Kachucks of the league, but he's like that perfect middle of the pack agitator who can kind of give you everything that you need. Another big body that the Devils don't have. So that's a guy I'm looking at if I'm going third line center. And if I'm looking in the top six and it's not going to be a guy like Jason Robertson, perhaps you pick up the phone and call St. Louis. Jordan Kyrou, a multi 30 plus goal scorer who has speed to burn, and would just complement Jesper Bratt and Jack Hughes to round out that line so well. I would certainly give up that first round pick to get a guy like Jordan Kyrou first and foremost. And then you have to add to that, right? So it's probably going to take Dawson Mercer, first round pick. Maybe another couple picks there too, a second rounder as well. You might have to throw in, I don't know that it's gonna take Nemitz as well. You might have to choose Nemitz or Mercer plus that draft capital. Maybe Seamus Casey, maybe Silyev goes, one of those guys. That's the kind of package you're looking at for Kyrou. And again, with the guy like Jason Robertson, you want the next two first round picks? Sure, take them. That's something that you're looking to do for sure. So you're talking big money deals for that. Now a guy like Charlie Coyle, he's on the last year of his contract, about $5.25 million. And he's a pending free agent, so you're not going to pay a boatload for him. It might take a second round pick. Maybe it's a Seamus Casey and a second round pick swap type thing, just to make sure you get that player. But certainly that's something I would do. Charlie Coyle would be one of the first guys I try to go out and get if the Blue Jackets decide he's not part of their future. Let's get to the next couple, and then we're going to wrap it up here for the day. Again, thank you guys so much for coming out and supporting. It was a really, really great first stream with the super chats. I really appreciate all of the support. So does producer Sean, by the way, behind the scenes. He's very happy and gleeful that you guys are here supporting. At Sonic9123 says, is there any way you can ship Markey maybe in a package deal? I saw an interesting thing today. I don't think you can. I don't think anybody's taking this contract. I don't think anybody's going to want to. But I did see an interesting thing today where I've texted multiple people and said, how is Jesper Wallstedt available in Minnesota? But Bill Guerin's just not afraid to take these big swings. And he's available. Can you move Markstrom? I don't know. But if you can somehow make sure that your future in goal is Jesper Wallstedt, then yeah, you're trading Jesper Markstrom. Listen to me. You're trading Jacob Markstrom or buying him out, whatever you have to do on July 1st. Get him off the books. And go get Jesper Wallstedt. Trade Mikhail Yegorov, trade Jacob Malik if you have to. Send them Dawson Mercer. Like I don't know what the package is gonna consist of, but Jesper Wallstedt is a cornerstone goaltender, and the reason why they're dangling him is because they have Philip Gustafsson, who is signed long term there. So they kind of have two really good goaltenders who they can afford to move on from one. But yeah, I don't know if you can move Jacob Markstrom, but I absolutely would figure out a way to move Jacob Markstrom if you can, because I mean he had a good game last night, but certainly you you could easily see tomorrow he's probably going to get the start again. It seems like they just keep going back to him. You just see he can't string along the wins. He can't string along the consistency. And if you can move him, you certainly do it. Go get Jesper Wallstedt if you can. You don't have to wait anymore for Mikhail Yegorov if you do. And Jesper Wallstedt, by the way, is like 23 years old, right? Am I wrong in saying that? How old is Jesper Wallstedt? He is 23. So I would go get that guy if you can. Again, this is just speculation. This is me just kind of, a pipe dream type thing. But if he's available, I mean, you have to at least make the call, right? So if you can get rid of Jacob Markstrom, don't know, but you should try. And last one here from Christy97 asks, what do you think Nico's next contract will look like? This is a great question. So, um, it's funny. The wretched Ryan Novozinsky keeps whispering in my ear, I don't know, man. Do you think he's going to stay around? I think he will. I think he will stay around. It will be interesting. But you look at, some of the comparables and who are his comparables going to be. The first guy you think of, you go to Florida and you say, what's Sasha Barkov's contract? Well, that's a $10 million deal, and you have to account for inflation. And you have to have that conversation too, where it's like, hey, if you're staying here, you're staying home. And we're gonna have to build around you, right? So, it I think it could be the Sasha Barkov deal, maybe a little bit more for the inflation. Excuse me. So you're talking maybe 10.5 million bucks. Maybe it's 11 million bucks. But if it has to go any more than that, that's concerning. I know the cap is going up. You know, I think the most you do, right? You extend them for the 7 years because you can, right? Seven is the max now. It's no longer eight. Or after September 15th, something like that, it's no longer eight. I think you extend them to the max if you can, and you give him no more than 12 million bucks because the cap is going up to 100 something next season. So you have a little bit more wiggle room, or not next season. By the time he's a UFA, actually, it's going to go up a lot, and they're going to have. Let's just go to our friends at Puckpedia here, a partner at New Jersey Hockey Now. They're going to have like $46 million in freed up cap space as of right now when Nico Hischier becomes a free agent. So that's a lot of money to work with. They have some other things to think of as well, in that time. But again, they're going to have to, have a conversation with themselves. By the way, $113.5 million is what the salary cap is going to be by the time Jesper Bratt is a free agent. Oh, we got another super chat. We're gonna read that in a minute. Thank you so much. But we're looking at $113.5 million for Nico Hischier for the Devils to work with. Now, obviously, he's not going to get all of that, right? He can't do more than 20%, but something like $12 million AAV for 7 years, I could see. And again, that's going to change so much between now and then too, because you have to see what, excuse me, these future contracts look like. There's this summer and next summer. Or leading up to next summer with all these guys who are going to get signed. And, if it doesn't happen before then, you're going to have to, kind of sit there and wonder like, okay, what are the new comparables going to look like? But I think you start with obviously the Sasha Barkov deal and you work from there and say, okay, are we going higher? Are we going lower? Account for inflation. And then, you have to kind of assume that those trade protections are going to be there. And hey, that's even if Nico Hischier is still here. I think he will be. I don't think there's this grand teardown coming. I think that there's going to be a shakeup of some sort, whether that's management, and then you work from there. But certainly, a good question. Thank you so much for that at Christie. And last but not least, our friend, me and Sean keep clicking the button at the same time. But we got it up there. Our friend at Collect Records 732 donates a $5 chat. Says great show, keep it up. Hashtag Let's Go Devils. Hashtag Fire Fitz. And I understand and appreciate the $5 super chat. That was very generous, and I really appreciate the support. Producer Sean really appreciates the support, and that's going to wrap it up for us today at the Devils Rink Report. This January 30th. Oh, we got another super chat. We can't wrap it up yet because coming in last minute and helping us meet our goal. We need like a button that does like confetti and like whistles and stuff because we met our goal at Sonic 9123 donates $10 and says, love your show. Keep doing what you do. Congrats on meeting your goal. Keep it going and keep grilling Tom Fitzgerald. So Sonic 9123, first ever super chat, then first ever super chat to help us meet our goal with the $10. He's also the highest. Sonic he's got the record book right now. Sonic 9123 has the record book right now. Highest super chat. Help us met the first goal. Helped with the first super chat ever. We are eternally grateful. Thank you so much for helping us out here at the Devils Rink Report. And that is going to wrap it up, I think, for this Friday, January 30th edition of the Devils Rink Report. Thank you so much for watching the show. You can catch us here every Friday, typically at 3:30. We went 3 o'clock today to help our friend Arthur Staple get to another prior commitment he had to get to. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for listening. Catch us here every Friday. Read us at the Sportsnot /NHL /New Jersey Devils. And we will catch you next week with another great guest right before the Olympic break. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Signing off.